across the country. Ang tuluyan na lifting ng mandatory mask mandate ay ipapilot towards the last quarter of 2022, provided na may improvement doon sa COVID-19 booster vaccination coverage. Hindi pa po ito polisiya, ngunit ito na po ang nire-rekomenda ng ating IATF at rekomendado ito for outdoors, non-crowded areas with good ventilation. Pero ang mga seniors or those immunocompromised ay hinihikayat pa rin na tuluyang magsuot ng mask.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Cito Beltran.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
The Interagency Task Force has recommended the optional use of face masks outdoors.
This was confirmed by Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles in the palace briefing earlier today. Angeles emphasized that the easing of the mask mandate is only applicable to non-crowded outdoor areas with good ventilation. She also said that senior citizens and immunocompromised individuals are highly encouraged to still wear face masks to stay protected. Malacanang added that they may completely lift the mask mandate at the end of the year if booster coverage improves.
Ang kanilang rekomendasyon ay sa pag-liberalize ng ating mask mandate, and make mask wearing outdoors voluntary across the country. Ang tuluyan na lifting ng mandatory mask mandate ay ipapilot towards the last quarter of 2022, provided na may improvement doon sa COVID-19 booster vaccination coverage.
Here to share his insights on the latest IATF recommendation, we have with us via Zoom Dr. Jose de Grano, President of the Private Hospitals Association of the Philippines. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Cito and Gretchen, and to all our listeners. Yes.
Okay, will it be okay to only recommend wearing of face masks to seniors and immunocompromised citizens?
Well, I think that's a better option, no? Rather than allow everybody to voluntarily do that. This A2, this segment of population is very vulnerable to this COVID. So I think that's a better option than giving it all.
Okay, taking a look at the positivity rate right now in NCR, it looks like it has decreased to 12.1% on September 2 and spiked to 12.7% as of September 6. And we know that the world standard is supposed to be at 5%. And we are also looking at the healthcare utilization rate. How is that going in our hospitals? What's the situation right now?
Right now, the hospital utilization rate is still low. So that puts us in a low-risk position. So I think that's a better decision because, IATF gets their suggestions also from consultants from the healthcare industry.
Were the doctors in the private hospital sector consulted, as you mentioned, since you're talking about consultation? And what's your reaction to pilot testing of lifting of mask mandate by the year end?
Well, directly not. We were not really consulted, but I know that there are a lot of private doctors or consultants being asked by IATF. But of course, if the figures are right, then we can try it. Because in other countries right now, here in Bangkok and in Singapore, they have done that already. And that even with that, the people still wears the mask.
Doctor, do you think we are ready for a maskless population, given that right now we have 18.2 million boosted individuals over with 100 million population, over 72 million fully vaccinated? With those numbers, a low booster rate, do you think we're ready?
I think we still have to monitor everything because right now, we're not very sure about the statistics, because the testing is not compulsory and not everybody who are testing are registered. So we don't know about the real score here. But the trend is going down and the symptoms are very low. So probably we can try that. Hopefully it does not lead into an increase in the number of cases.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jose de Grano, President of the Private Hospitals Association of the Philippines.
Thank you, Sito and Gretchen.
Join us in the conversation. Our big question tonight: is it time to lift the mask mandate? Share your thoughts on our Facebook and YouTube live stream or post a tweet with the hashtag #TheBigStory. We'll show some of your comments later on in the program. Right after the break, we'll get more details on the country's inflation rate with PSA's Glenn Polo and Soraya de Guzman. That and more when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Those who follow the crypto space closely. We've been waiting for this upgrade for years. This change, known as the merge, is a software upgrade. It's Ethereum's transition from proof of work to proof of stake. So what does the merge mean for users? Developers are reassuring that impacts will be minimal. But the upgrade will allow Ethereum developers to introduce new features. This update will see the Ethereum mainnet combined with the Beacon chain, which is a proof-of-stake system and is expected to be more eco-friendly by minimizing the environmental impact of mining activities. Many NFTs are built on the Ethereum network. The transition is expected to reduce energy consumption, meaning users will be able to mint and sell NFTs in a more sustainable way. For more updates on the merge and crypto content, follow us on QuickTake.
Sam, just give us an update on where the typhoon is right now. I believe it's left South Korea, but what really has been the damage that's been caused?
You're right. It looks like the typhoon is starting to exit South Korea. It landed, on the southern coast around 5 a.m. And, about an hour ago, it started to move through the eastern coast out toward the east. But there are reports that a large fire has happened at a Hyundai steel plant, and possibly due to the influence of the typhoon. And there's also a report of a fire breaking out at a Pohang POSCO steel plant. We don't know exactly why, what caused these fires, but it's very likely it has to do with the flooding that happened in those areas. So, we're still trying to have some real hard assessment of the
You're watching The Big Story here on One News. Manufacturers are now warning about a possible shortage of canned sardines later this year due to the supposed shortage of tamban. Shaila Francisco with the report.
Tons of tamban or sardine fish were sighted near the shores of Barangay Tambaliza, Concepcion in Iloilo Monday afternoon. Residents rushed to catch some for themselves and for added income. Hershey, the uploader of the video, says this just goes to show that there is enough supply of sardine fish in the country.
Masaya din po yung mga yung mga kasimanwa ko dahil binigyan kami ni Lord ng blessings at saka naman ay mahirap yung buhay, kaya naman nakakatulong yung tamban sa amin sa pagbili ng bigas, mga allowances namin sa sa eskwelahan at saka mga school supplies.
But the Canned Sardines Association of the Philippines still warns of a possible shortage in canned sardines from December to February. This is despite data from the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Bureau that supply will exceed demand by the end of the year. The group says commercial fishing vessels are having a hard time catching fish due to the limited fishing area. Most of the sardine fish are in municipal waters, and under the Fisheries Code, commercial vessels are not allowed to operate in these areas.
So, kulang ang fish supply ngayon. So, kung magkukulang ng fish supply ngayon, hindi maka-build up ng inventory, walang masyadong tamban doon kasi nagmamigrate siya sa loob ng municipal water kasi ang hypothesis ko dyan, yung plankton kasi ngayon nasa municipal water. Ang plankton kasi, ito yung pagkain ng isda.
The group says this could push prices of canned sardines up. Aside from the lack of catch, costs of raw materials like tin can and tomato paste have also gone up amid the depreciation of the peso. Some small retailers have already hiked canned sardine prices by up to 4 pesos. However, the BFAR clarified that commercial vessels are still allowed in certain areas of municipal waters.
Sinasabi ng batas na pwede naman buksan ang 10.1 to 15 kilometers sa commercial fishing vessels, subalit kailangang pumayag ang local government units subject to conditionalities, dapat makapagpalabas din ng ordinansa. Malinaw sa batas na dapat ang municipal waters ay sadyang para sa mga municipal fisherfolk lamang.
Local fishermen are also questioning the supposed shortage. The group Pamalakaya says commercial fishers are just using the issue to gain more access to municipal waters. But CSAP says they serve a different market from small-time fishermen. For now, the group is seeking a dialogue with stakeholders and government agencies to address the problem. Shaila Francisco, ER1 News.
Inflation in the country slowed down for the first time in 6 months. But how much of a factor were sugar prices in the inflation numbers? Boba journalist Jacob Lazaro tells us in this report.
The sugar importation mess has been in the headlines for weeks. Warehouses have been raided. Some soft drinks factories have had to stop operations. It has cost the job of some government officials and put pressure on the Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez. And yet, sugar may not be that big a deal when you look at the bigger picture.
Ang weight po ng sugar natin is nasa 0.46.
Okay.
Napakaliit naman pala talaga, no?
Ganun lang po yung weight ng sugar. Kaya hindi po masyado yung effect.
0.4%. It didn't even reach 1% of the total inflation. Salt and onion also saw a spike in prices. But the Guzman clarifies that just like sugar, these had little effect in inflation. Those that caused a significant jump in inflation were rice and other grains at 9.35%. Meats like pork, beef, and chicken at 6.43%, and fish at 5.56%. The bigger contributor on the inflation rate is coming from transportation at 21%. No big surprise, given the continuing rise in fuel prices. The pressure on fuel will continue, especially with the decreasing value of the peso. Based on the PSA's observation, changes in the peso-dollar value takes about 2 months before it's actually felt by consumers, especially in transport fares. In this case, that's in November.
So, ang nakikita po namin dyan, pagtataas po yung presyo ng petrolyo, in 2 months time, nakikita na rin po natin yung effect nito sa pamasahe, di ba po? So, tataas din po yung pamasahe.
The better news surrounding sugar may be hogging the headlines, but it is far from becoming a gut issue. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Let's get more details on the country's 6.3% inflation rate and what does this mean moving forward. Joining us via Zoom are Glenn Polo, OIC of the PSA Price Statistics Division, and Soraya de Guzman, OIC of the PSA Economic Sector Statistics Service. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening po.
Good evening,
Sir Cito and Ma'am Gretchen. Good evening, Sir Cito and Ma'am Gretchen.
Okay, does the PSA see the inflation numbers continuing to go down in the next few months leading up to 2023 or not?
Actually, Sir Chito and Ma'am Gretchen, the PSA only reports actual data. These come from our surveys conducted regularly within the month. It's the BSP who is doing the forecasting. And even for forecasters, today is still early to predict the movement of inflation. That's why the BSP usually releases their forecast at the end or close to the end of the month, because that's when they have substantial data coming from different sources to forecast the inflation. Like for example, the announcement of weekly oil price adjustments from the Department of Energy, announcement of the change in utility rates, and foreign trade data like importation of crude oil and other agri-products. Together with the official CPI weight from the Philippine Statistics Authority and the semi-monthly releases of the selected agricultural products, they can forecast the inflation.
Okay, ma'am, given the data that we have, aside from oil and commodities, U.S. dollar pain and continued geopolitical tensions, what else do you see as catalysts for the inflation numbers that we have right now?
Good afternoon, Gretchen. Good afternoon again. Good evening.
Ay, sir, nawala po yata yung audio natin. Oo,
sorry.
Yun. There you go.
Okay. Based on our experiences, ang makaka-epekto rito is yung weather condition. For the past few weeks, we're experiencing torrential rains, and definitely this will affect the transportation of vegetable from the vegetable-producing provinces, so yung from north. And kapag meron tayong kakulangan sa supply, definitely it will affect the inflation, and coupled with elevated prices, oil prices, although slowly decreasing na siya because of the series of rollbacks, still magkakaroon pa rin siya ng epekto sa inflation. So definitely yung weather condition natin will be a factor. Thank you.
Okay, what does the current data mean for workers and companies and even consumer goods and products in the market?
Actually, Sir Chito, this is a loop. If prices are increasing, purchasing power of the workers will decrease, lessening the quantity of the products they can afford. This will be used as a reason to ask for increase in wages, which will then affect the revenue of producers or companies. If the companies cannot shoulder the additional expense due to increase in wages, they pass this on to the consumers or the workers by increasing the prices of their products and services, which will again affect the purchasing power of the workers. And then the cycle goes on, just like the chicken egg situation.
And with that said, how soon do you think inflation might taper, and before the central bank can consider loosening policy rates and holding on to monetary policy?
Thank you for the question, Ma'am Gretchen. Again, we're not forecasting the inflation. It's the BSP's job. However, in the past, we noticed that the inflation increases in the last quarter of the year. So this is usually during the holiday season. So we experience increase in demand of commodities related to holidays. Example, the Noche Buena and Medianoche items. Also, household appliances, because this is the time of bonuses and gift-giving practices. So the last quarter is the holiday season, and somehow we expect this. So the CPI will increase, and then eventually
it will slow down in the early part of the succeeding year. So I think for this year, the BSP will still hold on the current interest rate unless we experience some unexpected positive event like series of rollback in oil prices and utilities, which will eventually pull down the prices of commodities, resulting in slower inflation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was Glenn Polo, OIC of the PSA Price Statistics Division, and Soraya de Guzman, OIC of the PSA Economic Sector Statistics Service. After the break, we'll get updates on President Bongbong Marcos' second day in Singapore. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
In recent clinical trials, these drugs have shown incredible results treating mental health illnesses like PTSD and depression. The FDA has even categorized psilocybin and MDMA as breakthrough therapies. Like antidepressants, they impact the brain's serotonin receptors and seem to produce effects that last for months or even years. But backlash has prevented research. So there's still a lot we don't know about how these drugs work. Answers to these questions will help with safety issues as these drugs become commercialized. But as Boris Heifetz at Stanford put it, new drugs won't fully solve America's mental health crisis.
Psychedelics are a catalyst for profound psychological transformation. It is a powerful aid to a basic human process of connection and healing.
The market for psychedelics, though, is undeniable. One estimate suggests it will reach $6.9 billion by 2027.
Sam, just give us an update on where the typhoon is right now. I believe it's left South Korea, but what really has been the damage that's been caused?
You're right. It looks like the typhoon is starting to exit South Korea. It landed, on the southern coast around 5 a.m. And, about an hour ago, it started to move through the eastern coast out toward the east. But there are reports that a large fire has happened at a Hyundai steel plant, and possibly due to the influence of the typhoon. And there's also a report of a fire breaking out at a Pohang POSCO steel plant. We don't know exactly why, what caused these fires, but it's very likely it has to do with the flooding that happened in those areas. So, we're still trying to have some real hard assessment of the damage that has happened, especially in the coastal areas where there's a lot of oil refiners and chemical factories and, even nuclear power plants.
So, Sam, you're in Seoul. How do things look in the capital at the moment?
Well, it seems like, the typhoon has kind of grazed past the capital. I mean, I was kind of expecting to be woken up by lots of gusts and rains, overnight, but that didn't happen. So it's looking a lot like a typical morning. I think that's possibly because the typhoon has been basically hitting the southern and eastern coasts, whereas the capital is in the west.
You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. President Bongbong Marcos is now on his way back to the Philippines from Singapore, capping off his first foreign trip as president.
His stay in Singapore involves the signing of various memoranda of understanding and agreements, as well as the naming of a new orchid hybrid after the chief executive and his wife. Marlene Alcaide with the story.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. started a 2 of his state visit in Singapore by attending an orchid naming ceremony. As part of Singapore's welcoming traditions, a new orchid hybrid was named after President Bongbong Marcos and First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos. The new hybrid or variety of orchid was named Dendrobium Ferdinand Luis Marcos.
We are very honored to have an orchid name after the president is spouse. By the name of this orchid, it actually signifies the closer relationship. It's a word between the orchid diplomacy, whereby we forge closer ties between the countries, the Philippines and Singapore.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong with his wife Madame Ho Ching hosted the breakfast with the first family. After that, President Marcos met with Singaporean President Halima Yacob and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to discuss key regional and global issues. Several agreements were sealed during the state visit. These include the Memorandum of Understanding for Digital Cooperation and Data Protection and agreements on regional counterterrorism cooperation. A Memorandum of Understanding was also signed on the development of New Clark City, as well as a joint communique on the recruitment of Pinoy health workers were also signed. In an economic briefing held here in Singapore, President Marcos invited more investors to take part in the Philippines' economic recovery.
We will change the game by structural reforms that we have set in place to allow for wider participation in our industries.
In terms of tourism, both countries discussed easing travel requirements for Filipinos and Singaporeans.
This is one of the biggest opportunities we have. If we can do it with Singapore, then perhaps we can standardize it with many more countries and we can encourage more travelers.
Singapore and Philippines also agreed on the importance of maintaining peace and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. Both countries believe that the dispute can be resolved peacefully. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
There are now more bicycle users in the country than there are car users, according to the latest SWS survey. This renews the push for the creation of more bike lanes in major roads. Gerard de la Peña with the story.
Many commuters have started using bicycles to get to work amid the pandemic due to lockdowns. According to several surveys by the social weather stations, there are now more bicycle users than car owners. The survey noted 4 bicycle users for every 1 car owner. Among those who started using bikes is Victor, who is able to save 80 pesos per day from fares.
Yung pumasahe, sayang, medyo malaki yung pumasahe kasi minimum lang yung namin, yung sahod. Kaya bisikleta lang, ito exercise din.
But Victor has one request, that's to make biking safer for cyclists.
Lalagyan siguro lahat ng harang kasi yung iba walang wala pang harang yung ibang bike lane, yung guhit lang.
The DOTR so far constructed more than 500 kilometers of bike lanes in Metro Manila, Cebu, and Davao. But DOTR officials admit there is still much to be improved on.
Nagmadali talaga tayo sa construction ng bike lanes. Gusto lang namin magkaroon ng bike lanes at that time because there was strong demand for it. So we acknowledge and we recognize that there are certain portions na lubak-lubak, hindi na naayos yung kalsada.
A group of advocates for commuter rights is also dismayed over the rush construction of bike lanes.
So nakakalungkot na siyempre pera yan ng bayan, dapat nagastos ng maayos sa pamamaraan na talagang makaka-respond. Nakakalungkot dahil sa pagmamadali nila ay na-sacrifice yung kalidad ng ating mga bike lane.
In August, the DOTR received 2 billion pesos from the Budget Department for the expansion and improvement of bike lanes. With this, the agency is planning to open new bike lanes in provinces such as Aklan, Pampanga, Batangas, Albay, Rizal, and Laguna. The DOTR also plans to revive the bike-sharing program to serve more commuters. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
Well, there are definitely more bikers after the pandemic. Of course, people saving up on transportation costs, people wanting to lessen the time that they have for commute in the morning. And I think what they're calling for is really safety on the road. I mean, safer bike lanes, respect for the bikers, protected bike lanes, and all of that.
Forgive the pun. No pun intended. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I would strongly suggest to those people in office, particularly the president, to take a visit take a trip to the Netherlands and study how it's been done in the last 50 to 100 years so that we can have proper bicycling infrastructure in the Philippines.
I think it's not just in the Philippines though, it's a worldwide movement. People or societies moving away from car-centric transportation. So they're realizing now that if you have more bikes, it helps ease traffic. People, there's more people who can use the roads. You maximize road space, and everything follows. You just have to have support for infrastructure and user. Like in the offices, kailangan may paligo, di ba pwedeng pawis-pawis ka
And
na, di ba?
people who are not judgmental when I ride my old bicycle.
Oh, that's true.
And
that's true.
the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and The Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analysis. I'm Cito Beltran.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.